Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Everyday Intuition. I'm Conscious Medium Brandon Ross, and with me today is someone that has a long journey and he helps people on their path. I have Crist here, and he is going to talk to us today about being a shaman and the Jaguar path. Hey, Ray, how you been?
I've been good. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you. It's so good to see you again, Brandon. I'm really honored to be here
You
today
know,
in your.
it's great to see you again. And again, I know you're from upstate New York and Capital District, and we always kind of stayed in touch. And then all of a sudden, I open up one of the social medias, and sure enough, there you are in Costa Rica. And having had conversations with you and just seeing it really kind of do the arc, and then making jumps and leaps like that, I wanted you on the show because there's got to be a story of the journey behind it. So where are you now in Costa Rica? Like, is this your space? Like, do you work in a particular area? What do you do?
Yes, yeah, we're in our space. Our thing is the Jaguar path. We call this the Jaguar Den, and we're in Nosara, Costa Rica. That's on the west coast, on the Pacific, somewhere in the middle to north. Nosara is a really just like cute town. It's a surf town, and I could say a yoga town. I think it's probably one of the yoga meccas of the world. There's a
Oh,
Bodhi
that's really
tree is here, Blue Spirit is here. These places that we teach a lot out of.
that's fantastic, and we'll talk a little bit more about the retreats that you have going on as well from time to time as a teacher. But tell us about your path. Like, how did you choose shamanism? When I have students, there's a whole plethora of things to really kind of specialize. And when, somebody takes intuitive development with me, I kind of explain it as pre-med, where it's like, don't pick a lane quite yet. Make sure you understand quite a bit of it. And those that end up gravitating towards shamanism, I find traditionally, the animal speak thing is definitely a big thing for them. But what inspired you? And tell us a little bit about your journey.
I would love to share, Brandon. I was definitely inspired. I was inspired by stage 4 cancer diagnosis. In 2003, I received this, I don't want to say accidental diagnosis. I was doing an ultrasound because of some abdominal pain, and all of a sudden we saw a lot more than anyone imagined. And essentially, I was given 3 months of life, and this is in 2003.
Yeah, and now that
And
we're in 2021, I'm just going to say, way to bust the odds up early.
oh yeah.
That
Yeah, we
that's
got on that
that's a
path.
bracket buster. Who had Ray
Uh,
going out third month? Bust up
so
more.
yeah. So essentially what happened, and I'll fast forward that story and share more also of the path and where the Jaguar path is right
Mhm.
now. But essentially at that moment when I got that diagnosis, of course, I fell apart. My whole life fell apart. Um, and I immediately
It,
started making
it needed
life.
to. It needed to, right?
That was a blessing, that was a blessing.
Always
I,
is.
I was talking with some friends the other day, and I was saying, it's like, in one sentence, I was saying this was the most difficult time in my life, and then the other sentence, I was saying it's the best time of my whole entire life. And one thing, looking back, is that the essence is that we don't change. We're creatures of comfort and of routine. If we have a routine and it's comfortable enough, we'll never change it. I want that same coffee every day. If I can save the same view, and if we can have the same people and the same conversations, it's kind of like a thing for the human species. We just like this thing of repetition, and it's kind of like nourishing for us. It feels comfortable, safe. But when that rug is pulled under our feet, or when that cosmic 2x4 hits us, that's when, while it's upsetting, while it may be difficult, while it hurts, and it can create a havoc of emotions and a lot of drama around one's life and families and people around, it is the only motive to really change and to really evolve. Because really evolve and evolution for a shaman means I am shedding my skin, I'm letting go of who I was, and now I become someone new. And that means that I have to let go of that pattern. I have to let go of that. You know what? I like drinking the same coffee in my same balcony, the window, or whatever it is every day.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
and it's
there's kind of a
interesting.
spotlight there. You just shown a spotlight on a lot of people right there, just to let you know that gasp that you heard was like, oh yeah, I like the same coffee.
We do.
Just gonna go.
I wasn't
Just gonna.
talking about you, man. I'm talking about everyone else.
Listen. I went old school with an old logo mug. But yeah, so what were the things that you had to shed? Like, what were the things that made you go, oh yeah, I really gotta, deconstruct this? Because I think we all go through this, and our parents went through this thing where it'd be like, oh, it's a midlife crisis. And I'm finding that a lot of us, we all go through that checks and balances where our knowledge matches our obligations, and then we start to make decisions differently. And it may look like a midlife crisis, but what it really is your knowledge catches up to you. And in your case, you had not only knowledge, but then you had this physical ailment. And boy, oh boy, take it away. What happened?
Well, I'll fast forward because it does feel, it's been a long time ago, and obviously I don't have cancer, and I'm healthier,
Hmm.
happier. I'm actually taller. I'm actually more flexible. I'm actually more powerful than I was back then. And when I was 40, at 56, I'm taller than I was when I was 40. Talking
That's a
about yoga,
thing.
talking about shamanism, it's a thing. Yoga and
Yeah.
shamanism really create just this whole new reality. But I'll say what happened is that I let go of everything. It hit me. At the time, I lived most of my life in Greece, and I
Mhm.
was a photographer, an advertisement, a fashion photographer in Athens, Greece, and I had this successful career being a Vogue photographer and doing all the billboards of the city and the buses, photos, and all that. There was like, but my heart was not thriving. I still was not really doing what I have come here to do on this planet in my life. There's parts of me that was suffocating. I wasn't helping people. I was rather creating these dreams as unattainable dreams through these photography of imaginary beauty and imaginary things we all need, the cars, the TVs, the this and
Mhm.
that. They're all fine. All these things
Yeah.
are beautiful and they're okay to have in life, but uh, for me, not enough for my soul. So I feel that's what my soul told me. So I decided and realized that if I would go to the Western way, it was really clear. The doctor said, you're going to need 4, 5, 6 surgeries, and it's either the surgeries are going to get you or the cancer. So he said, I don't know what to say. Maybe you just want to savor the last few months of your life and go on the beach and relax. And I'm like, I'm not going to do any of all the above. I hardly packed up. I filled a backpack with a few clothes and disappeared. It's funny, as a teenager, I loved Carlos Castaneda, and I had
Uh-huh.
read all his books. I don't know if you're familiar with Carlos
Sure.
Castaneda's books and journeys. So
Yeah, the adventure begins. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
adventure, journey to Ixtland,
Yep.
this Tower of Seeing, etc. Now, there was a sentence that popped in my head when I got the diagnosis. I had read that book 20 years before that time that I got the diagnosis, and there was a sentence where Don Juan, the main character of and teacher, shaman teacher of Carlos Castaneda, said to Carlos. So Don Juan said to Carlos, "When death knocks on your door, change your address." And this sentence just came right up in my head, a few days later after this diagnosis. And I'm like, oh my God, this book I read as a kid and when I was 20, uh, he said this, and death is knocking on my door. And I got a backpack and I took off and I decided I'm going to go through Mexico to find all the naguals, the sorcerers, the
Mm.
curanderos of Mexico, inspired by Carlos Castaneda's books. And I eventually found my way to go further down to Mexico, where I did work with several shamans, found several shamans, but went into Peru, and that's where I really hit home, where I met
Mhm.
my teachers, I met the lineage that I really connected with. And part of your question is, what did I have to let go? I let go of everything.
Yeah.
And what I
That's
gained,
really profound when when you speak to it. Talk about the healing. Obviously you overcame the cancer, but what were some of the things that shamanism brought to you through that experience that, and it's always one of those things. It's like you go back and forth of healing. I mean, you're here kind of just kind of without any hesitation, basically being like, okay, well, I'm here because I went on this journey. Um, how did these change of techniques and the idea of like letting go of your favorite coffee, let's say, really kind of integrate on you saying, hey, these are the changes I needed to make, and this is where it brought me to.
It's a big one. It was, again, as I said, it's like what I had to change was everything, and uh, I had everything to gain, and I gained everything by letting it go. So I want to say that when I first arrived, I think one of the most important things when I finally got to Peru and I started talking to the shamans, I have three teachers from three distinct different lineages,
Hmm.
and still till today, I am with the two of them. The third one has passed, and still he guides me from the other side. But
Of
um,
course.
still, I receive their mentorship. I'm an apprentice of them. They have initiated me and they guide me through all these trainings that I offer. They're right there behind me. Many times they're next to me and even online with me. But essentially, they are the ones holding the lineage. And as a Greek or as an American or even as a white person, yeah, I'm not Caro, I'm not an ancient Inca person, but what the Caros and my teachers have not only persisted and insisted, they have pushed me, backed me up, and in a way, they have really pushed me, made me teach this work, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful to that. And at some point in the beginning, I said, "Well, how am I going to teach all this?" And my teacher, Don Francisco, turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Teach it in English. That's how you're going to teach it." And of course, meaning much more than just the language, teach it in a way that a Western mind can comprehend it. Because what I first found was essentially, I realized when I was in the Sacred Valley talking with Don Francisco and beginning my training, while I didn't even know it, that first hour, I was already in a lifetime apprenticeship, which I'm still in and I
Right.
love. It's my entire life with Francisco and Sebastian. What I realized is that it was not my car and my motorcycle, my job and my cameras, the coffee, the city, and the friends that I had to let go of. What
Hmm.
I really had to let go of was more than that, was the way I thought, the way I perceived life,
Yeah.
the way I thought, where I thought reality was or is, where I thought and then where I was looking at reality, my perception of reality, that I had to let go of because I had made many assumptions that belong to the collective consciousness that were common sense. And
Right.
I've come to discover that this work, as Carl Jung called it, is uncommon sense,
Yes.
that rises above the collective and allows each individual to tap into their internal shaman because I know it, you know it very well. Each and every one of us is a shaman. My students, my clients that come to my office for healing, my cancer patient, my person that's heartbroken and needs healing for their heart, the person that's lost the way and needs a compass, they all are shamans.
Hmm.
And it's about going through, if you want, this hero's journey, or it's about having the luck of the opportunity, the blessing of having things taken away,
Yeah.
where then you can only tap inward and, and then have to depend on yourself to find that light rather than depending on external points of references, which, as we have recently seen, can actually all fall apart.
Yeah.
And
It's
then when
it's
those fall apart,
it's a
what do
great
we?
it's a great mythos to this, and you see my light up behind me here. This actually represents what you would see in the hermit card, which is in the tarot, where it really talks about your inner light and doing your self work, and basically making yourself immune to not feeling a loss, but rather seeing it as a process. And I'm a student of world philosophies and really understand how shamanism really applies to every single walk of life. It reaches all the corners of the world, literally. And it influenced things like Christianity. It influenced things such as Buddhism. It influenced things such as our social structures. But
Mhm.
where it lost its way is that collective consciousness that you're talking about here, um, really became a strode, kind of got out of its own way. And then it kind of started to create its own rules where it's like one person be like, oh yeah, well, that doesn't serve me. I don't really like that. So I'm going to do it this way. And then somehow that kind of, changes that. And it's funny, we're going through this whole thing now about cancel culture. And it's funny where there's a big difference. There's a huge difference between going through something and saying, this doesn't work for me anymore, as opposed to saying, I don't like that, so I'm going to negate it. There's two totally different processes.
Ab-
You
Absolutely.
you had to work with it. Like, what was the experience like when you had to work with some of these, patterns that you had to identify and then change? Like, walk us through some of that process. I mean, was it something where you like literally sat down and said, I do A, B, and C, and A, B, and C doesn't work for me anymore? Like how in depth did you get? How granular did you get? Or was it just you had to wake up with a whole new philosophy and start all over again?
I think it was a little bit or a lot of a lot of both. Uh, First of all, my choice was really clear, and looking back, obviously, it accidentally was wise that I just got up and left, because one of the things that the shamans say clearly is that we are what surrounds us. What I breathe is what makes my cells. What I eat builds my cells. What I look at, what I hear creates my nervous system, my endocrine system builds my reality. So as I let go of that, whatever it is, whatever it was that drove my body to cancer, that drove my heart to so much pain that I developed cancer or difficulty or what it was, leaving everything assured that I was also leaving those factors that were contributing to my dis-ease.
Mm,
So the process of letting go for me was total, and it doesn't have to be for everyone. I like in one of our conversations you said it's like it's nice, maybe we can provide some shortcuts maybe for people to
yeah.
get fast forward instead of having to go through that huge painful process. A little pain is okay, but if I can, through my teachings and through my trainings and through my healing sessions, if I can save people some miles or some hours of pain or the difficulty, I'm more than happy to,
Hmm.
because it was a difficult process. But at the same time, I think I've mentioned and shared with you, it's just like looking back at those years, the most difficult years of my
Yeah.
life, 2003 to 2006, 2007, I want to say. It was 4 years ago. My life was, it was or wasn't. The doctors
Yeah.
all were saying, you're not going to live. That's it. You know, a year later, after my first original diagnosis in Athens, Greece, in 2004, this is 12 months, I had surpassed their original diagnosis by 8 months. I went to John Hopkins, and John Hopkins, they looked at my, they did MRIs, CAT scans, and the head of the department raised his hands and said, I'm sorry. And I'm like, what does that mean? Is there anything I can do? He said, I think what you should do is take care of your affairs. And you know, that's
Wow.
awesome. That was awesome because I still have that inside me every day. Every day I take care of my affairs.
How can you
Every day
not?
I
Oh my
square
gosh.
up.
So it ended up being, so here he is thinking that he's writing your death sentence, and what he's really doing was giving you a way of life. Take care of your affairs.
Absolutely.
Ray,
Take care of your
that's incredible. And the other part of it's funny in my mind. I'm like, oh, there's a question here. I have to ask him. What does that feel like? Being told that you only take care of your affairs. You used it as a launching pad.
I
You
don't know
used
if
it as a
that
launching.
shape, that shadow showed, and this eagle just flew right by the second you said that. Um,
Well, you are a shaman.
I am a
I don't
shaman.
expect anything less from you, Ray, at this point. I mean, I always make a joke with whenever I'm planning an event, I'll say like, oh yeah, we have our best shamans working on the weather right now, and it's like I say it to people like town clerks that want to know, permits and stuff like that. I go, well, we have our best clerks, we have our best shamans working on it now, and they like look at me and they're like, what? And I'm like, yes, yes, you see hawks
Yeah,
often, you see crows, don't you? And they're like, yes, yes, I do. I don't know. There we go. It's they're all working for us.
yeah.
But that's incredible. So tell me about the shamanistic experience in Costa Rica. I mean, obviously it's a little more rain. It is a rainforest, but what drew you to Costa Rica? Like what really kind of brought you to that? I mean, I would imagine that the work itself and how you're set up is very much the retreat and the outreach and being available for people that need their healing energy based on your healing path as well. But what particularly really brought you to Costa Rica?
Well, I'm going to start by answering that first part of the question is like, how did it feel losing everything? Or how did it
Mm,
feel being confronted with this death sentence, death diagnosis? And I want to say it felt scary. It felt
sure.
very scary.
That's human.
I
That's being
I
human, right?
fell apart. I
Yeah.
fell apart many, many times. At the time, I had a 2-year-old son. I had a beautiful life that included a wonderful career in photography, and I had beautiful sailing that I did in sailing in the Greek islands, a
Mhm.
good life. It was painful and it was scary. And there
Mhm.
is nothing better that ever happened to me. If I was still in that, I'm talking about that, being comfortable with my coffee and my car and my sailing boat and my everyday life, I was way too comfortable to ever awaken. And again, there's nothing wrong with a nice motorcycle, a nice car, or a sailing boat, or a good cup of coffee. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as we can always remember, to awaken. So to jump
Mhm.
to that, those shifts and changes, that made me change where I lived, and I never returned to Athens to live for long term. Um, since 2004. I visit every now and then, and we do retreats every year. But in essence, I established myself in the United States, and I created a home. And the funny thing, coming to talk about, how do I end up at Costa Rica? Costa Rica was a COVID gift for me, and
Mhm.
with deep respect and honor for those who have suffered, those who have lost beloved ones to this, those who are suffering now, either physically or even more importantly, to the widespread people that are suffering psychologically, their heart, because the system has fallen apart, because our routine, the coffee, their normal
Mhm.
life is falling apart. For me, that seemed to happen once again. I've been leading retreats and trainings for many years here in Costa Rica, here in Nosaro, Costa Rica. It's a place where Mother Earth is fully alive and you're in direct connection with it
Right.
being 80 to 90 degrees constantly. It's easy, you're really close to nature all the time. And what happened for me is like it took all those years to reestablish myself, if you want, to buy
Right.
a car again, to buy a home again. I had lost everything back then in 2004. I had a backpack, as I said. And
Yeah.
after those 14 years of living upstate New York, I had finally come to, be able to say, hey, this is my car, this is my home, da, 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 until the blessing of COVID, until COVID came. And guess what? I took a backpack. I
Yeah.
actually was here when everything hit last March. We're teaching a yoga teacher training. We're teaching a shamanic training. My wife and I, that is,
Mhm.
who run the Jaguar path. And we got news that this is happening, and a month passed, and another month passed. We had come here with a backpack with a lot of yoga clothes and a wedding dress. That's all we had.
That's all you
We
got.
had come here to
Listen,
get
do you need
married.
anything more than that? I guess. I mean,
I have come to know that no one needs anything more. Just a
yeah.
few yoga classes and a wedding dress.
I mean, and listen, with that, I mean, the simplicity and I think that the part of this and the goal of a podcast like this is really to kind of show, that paths like this sound extraordinary, but it ends up in ordinary times really kind of becoming that moment. I mean, you were leading a very kind of naturally successful life, and the walls came down, with a diagnosis, and then your journey began. And then you have these serendipitous moments where you're like, oh yeah, let's go teach this. We're going to teach it, down here in February, of 2020. And then, you get down there, and then as you go to get back on the plane, they're like, there's kind of an outbreak. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? And then you're looking at your backpack going, I got like 4 days worth of clothes here. Like, I'm not, I gotta switch this around. There's something really empowering to that, and it's also cathartic because you've already been through that. You've already been through that loss matrix of like, okay, I'm walking away from it. You literally had to lose your body and recreate it, through choices, through all of the lifestyle stuff. Did doctors ever react after cancer was no longer in your system? Like, what was that reaction? What did that feel like? How long did it take?
Well, in light and in disclaimer of all things, after I had gotten a diagnosis from John Hopkins, because I had been diagnosed 2 years prior to that, or a year and a half prior to that, they found it interesting that I didn't do anything. And they were kind of like, he's like, well, why didn't you do something back then? I'll fast forward and say that a week later, they contacted me and they asked me if I wanted to partake in a research for the National Institute of Health in NIH in Washington. And that essentially study had to do with, first of all, doing one surgery instead of 4 or 5 that were generally what was the
Hmm.
idea that would be needed because
Hmm.
cancer had spread. I had bilateral renal carcinoma, which means in both kidneys. Kidneys are considered, because blood clears through
Hmm.
them, it tends to spread the cancer really fast to other parts. So I did do one surgery in 2005 in the National Institute of Health and surrendered my right kidney. Then I went to Peru a few months later, and basically for the first 2 years, I would be every 3 months, then every 6 months, then every year, I'd go back to the National Institute of Health and we do these CAT scans and MRIs.
Sure.
And
Sure.
yeah, that's exactly where the MRIs and the CAT scans were showing things beginning to get smaller or things beginning to disappear. The reaction I had was, what are you doing? Whatever it is you're doing, keep on doing it. I
Right.
chose at the time not to say to the doctor of the National Institute of Health, to say, you know what, I'm going down in the depth of the jungle and I'm doing ayahuasca and I'm going up to the top of the Andes and I'm calling to Mother Earth and Father Sky. I chose to say, yep, I will keep on doing it. I eat well, I do yoga, and I left it at that.
Hmm.
It was interesting to have that kind of sense of backup, or kind of sense of like to actually see.
Absolutely.
Today, today, and I stand in a place, and I think you know this from times I've presented, excuse me, at your place. It's like I believe in everything. I know that if I hadn't done that surgery, I would not be alive today. But more importantly, I know something else. If I hadn't worked with the shamans, I wouldn't be alive today. More importantly, if I had gone back to who I was,
Yeah.
that was the Ray that was in dis-ease and discomfort, in
Hmm.
not aligned with my own dharma, with what I had come with. So that Ray did die, and a new Ray was reborn. And and again, it almost feels like, after 15 years of getting a little bit comfortable, living out of upstate New York, teaching a lot out of Kripalu's
Hmm.
yoga center for 15 years, it seemed that that coffee was getting a little too monotonous. I had to lose it all once again, to lose that Ray once again. And
Yeah.
that we're terrified most of all is like, how am I going to be? Who am I going to be? It is that opportunity, and that is given to all of us right
Yeah.
now. And again, with absolute respect for those who have lost beloved ones, for those who suffer now, either
Yeah.
psychologically or physically from this, um, it is an opportunity. It is an
Yeah.
opportunity. We all lose everything. To say, okay,
I
what are the
agree.
parts of yourself? What
I
are the
can't
parts you
agree
want?
with that more. I cannot agree with that more because I think that there truly is a dynamic where, and again, I think anytime you speak of COVID, I mean, I think the general respect of anyone that's lost life in general is a natural thing when you do this work. But the opportunity, the big reset button, the opportunity to really kind of delineate, okay, this is what works, this isn't what works. I mean, I did it personally, I did it as a business, I did it on a lot of different levels to be able to say like, okay, this is where I'm going, moving forward. And it's great because I even through my own changes, I just embrace every day. Every day is, I tell people sometimes how much I work, and then they're like, oh my gosh, you ever take a break? And my response is I, yeah, it was like for 45 years before I figured it out. Like that was my break. Now I have to go and get it done, right? And it's the music and the presentation and the teaching and the shows and all that stuff. And what I also love about your story too is that you didn't forsake the Western medicine part of this, because I really think that and I don't bring this up because I'm worried somebody's going to say like, oh, you can't make claims and all that other garbage. Like, I'm not responsible for your free will. Like, it's part of the equation. If you want to go and do something crazy, don't go blaming me, or Ray or anybody else. But I love that you merged that piece of it and you shared that part of the story, because there is that part where as much as you do that, as much as you went through that surgery, you didn't rely on them to do all the work. You were like, I also have to make changes. It's kind of like when somebody goes through bariatric surgery. They can go through it, but if they still eat like crap, like they're just going to put the weight on again. They're going to be just as unhealthy, if not more unhealthy, because they're being compromised in other ways. And, for you to kind of make that change and for you to really address that front forward, I think is really important to the path in all of this. And, I mean, did you feel, I've heard people say this, like they feel like failures when they have to give themselves away to Western medicine. You really didn't have a whole lot of choice, but that sounded like a good option at the time. Did you feel like you were compromising yourself after working with shamanism and, kind of going back and forth with this? Did you feel compromised that you had to kind of succumb to Western medicine here?
Not at all. I
Good.
didn't, and looking back years later, uh, in the know of the shamanic work that
Mhm.
I have done and the trainings that I received and the knowledge that I have of how healing actually happens, um, the essence is that all disease begins in an energy first. It begins with a a meridian, if you want, that is closed, and energy is beginning to slow down and create friction. A small block in a meridian creates a little bit of friction where heat starts coming up, and then we have
Mhm.
what's beginning to show up in the physical, where you can see that's energetical only. It's an idea or something that's
Right.
happening on a karmic level. Then it starts developing on a physical level. It starts showing up again. A block meridian starts showing up in inflammation, and inflammation starts showing up eventually as a growth. A growth shows up, and it's a cancer.
Yeah.
All ailments are originally an energetic level, and when we can catch them on an energetic level, we can change the vibration, the frequency. We can heal that before it expresses itself. But once it has, so in my right kidney, there was a
Mhm.
growth that was 7 centimeters big. It was like big as an apple. That was a real entity, in Chinese
Right.
medicine and
Oh my
in
gosh.
and the shamanic world. We say that's, it had a spirit of its own. It wanted to live. It wanted to grow. It wanted to. So
Mm.
at that point, as my teachers agreed, my shaman teachers agreed, at that point it was a little bit too hard to rattle it or feather it away. But if we're talking about something that's coming up, the feathers, the rattles are absolutely very powerful tools and will change and do change people's life. And so they did with everything else, along with medicine from nature, medicine from the jungle itself, because I
Mhm.
did go through a very strict regimen of what I called my chemotherapy, which was ayahuasca ceremonies, especially in those
Mm.
first 2, 3, 4 years in it. Right? So through ayahuasca
Yeah.
ceremony, I cleared out my internal organs. But more importantly than all, I experienced my death. And through dying, I was able to see that every time that I would be in a ceremony, I would experience dying. I would wake up in the morning and I was quite alive and
Mhm.
even more alive than the previous day because there was parts of myself, belief systems, limiting ideas that I had about reality that were holding me back, and those would die because those are not the true. No, they were not the truth of reality. They were just what I had in my head, and they were really limiting me.
Yeah.
So
And
as I shed all that, I
it's interesting
become.
that you bring up the Hiawatha, and again you pronounce it differently than I do insofar that you were
Ayahuasca.
trained, you were trained to say it. I just mirror and mimic. And I've spoken to other people. I think that there are shamans that are truly split on that. Simply because there are the people that are truly called to it, and it sounds like you were, under the guidance. And then I see other people that are like, oh yeah, I think, I really want to experience this, but they don't put the work in to actually experience it. They do it because they think, okay, well, if I can hallucinate, something, or I can be connected to something, then they're doing it for the wrong reasons, simply enough. But in doing it for the right reasons, you really kind of share the benefit of it, where you can let go of those belief systems and let go of the concepts and the constructs that might have made you sick to begin with, and calling it dis-ease, I think, is
Mhm.
something that we just in our society. And I know you're thousands of miles away, but you're still certainly very much part of the major culture of what we do. And that is that you look at these things and it's like it's another place for shortcuts. Pop a pill, do a thing, blah 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 blah, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to deconstruct this and actually do the things that were making me sick to begin with, reversing them. Boy,
Mhm.
talk about looking at your cup of coffee. I mean, that is the intrinsic things that I think, as a society, we really have a hard time. Why do you think we have such a difficult time in making, these changes, even though when they sit with someone like you and they're like, listen, here are the bare basics. Like, why do we need anything more? Why do we make it complicated? Why did we process this food? It's right here. I peel it, I eat it. Why are we complicating this? Why do you think we have such a hard time making that jump, or that regression, so to speak?
Well, there's many reasons I feel there's many reasons that I've seen in making changes and changing who I am and what I am and how I act in the world. And um, I want to say that first of all, it is because we are, as mammals, we are habitual creatures and we like that coffee every day.
Right.
That if I can have the same coffee every day, the moment I have it, I remember yesterday and the day before yesterday, and it says, "Yep, those days were real. That existed." It comes to tell me, "Yep, you're here. Yes, you're here." And
Hmm.
again, when I repeat something, it's almost like really, it's like that nourishment and the reassurance that I am
Right.
okay, I'm alive, I'm here because here I am, I'm doing it again. So it was real yesterday, it's real today. There's a reality to it. But for me, the biggest part of why these changes are difficult to happen is because we evolved as a species. We're not the same as we were when we were Neanderthals, right? Or when we were before Neanderthal.
Well, I
Or
have a few people that will say I haven't, but okay, fair enough, Ray. I mean,
I agree. We've changed very little. But we've changed a little bit.
same
Totally
DNA.
agree. It's very little, but we have changed a little bit. And what I want to say is this here, that there's you referred to it a little bit just a few minutes ago. You were saying it's like what happened? How do we lost track of things and
Hmm.
in the Western world? And the thing is this, that there's something that happened that was called the Dark Ages.
Mm.
The Dark Ages, along with the Dark Ages, that play, the main character was the Spanish Inquisition. So
Sure.
what happened was really big, and I don't want to make it political. I think it's anthropological and it's historical and it's a fact that what happened in that time is that three things were persecuted in the Western world: the feminine, the animals, and magic.
Mm.
So what happened when the feminine was persecuted, we lost connection with the feminine nature of our own selves, men and women. We lost the reverence for the feminine, for our mothers, and the greater mother, Mother Earth, and grandmother Moon. We've lost reverence when we lost our our respect for the feminine, and then we have the feminist revolution now trying to climb out of this place where they brought us, where like they
Mm.
had all this misinformation and all this thing about the feminine and women. Then animals, we were
Yeah.
essentially one of the most important things, and I feel it and I hear it when you talk about my experiences in the jungle of Peru, or when you refer to my living here. This is a big difference of what the difference has been living here, and even in upstate New York, in the woods that I had a place, uh, is that here we live closer to the animals. When the Spanish Inquisition
Mm.
persecuted the animals, the big ad at the time was, humans are the favorite creation of God, and the rest are beasts here to serve us.
Eminent domain. Yeah, we're like, yeah, we're in charge here. Yeah,
In
isn't
charge,
that?
yeah,
Well, I love
it's
that you're
all
doing
about,
that kind of that slow spread. Like we have dominion over the animals. It's like let's just highlight that part of the Bible and just focus on it, right?
yeah. And I think, and essentially what's happened is, as we moved away from nature,
Mm.
we moved away from our own nature. And when I talk to people, you see, when I work with my clients or my students, when I see people that are lost or hurting, or even have come now to the place of disease, or with my cancer patients, I see that they've lost. I remember it myself. They've lost relationship with their own nature. We've lost that.
Yeah.
We've come into that place of human supremacy, and human supremacy leaves everyone to their own nothingness, basically.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like
Someone's work.
yeah, we eliminated all of the checks and balances. I mean, basically what you're saying is that we're eliminating the checks and balances. So,
Absolutely.
with that feminine divine energy, I mean, I look at that even in my own work. I mean, the thing that I needed to go through personally is I really needed to balance my masculine and feminine. 100% adopting a child and then taking care of someone who I literally had no responsibility for 24 hours before I signed the papers, and and be able to nurture and change diapers and do the feedings and everything else, and having that part to me really allowed me to like tap into that again. I'm like, oh, that's what this is. right? Does that make sense? It's like I
Absolutely.
had to, if I did not have that, I tell people this all the time. I went from doing this work and I was pretty good at connecting and, I was still I was still a kid in a candy shop. So I just was like, okay, I'm going to keep going with this. But when that happened for me, something clicked and and I'll never forget it. I was actually with a teacher and we went out to Lilydale and my entire I was deconstructing everything because I was away from that child for like, it was like 3 months in and I'm like, oh gosh, I have an opportunity to go and, be with this teacher and everything else. And it was only 2 days. It was not like a long time. But in those 2 days, I just completely lost it because I'm like, I just saw where I'm supposed to go with this. And now I'm trying to go back the old way and being the dude and, and whatever. And it had nothing to do with the teacher, but the teacher definitely was in the right place at the right time to show me that. And for me, that's I can fully attest to that separation of the feminine divine part of it. And I think we argue this and it's become toxic because it's just looked at, masculine is bad and feminine is good, and that cancel culture thing again, as part of the conversation. The cancel culture is actually a device of the unbalanced. Instead of saying, hey, listen, let us both equally rise, let us both equally kind of, step into this. That's really where the power is. That's where the magic is. And it's funny, you also brought up that magic was villainized. And what's your take on that? I mean, I think I love this conversation. I just love it. So what's your take on the, magic being eliminated, during the Dark Ages?
Absolutely. There's a lot of power to that. We all, every single person I've met in my life, every single being has magic, not only humans. But
Mm-hmm.
talking about us humans, every human being, once you can either learn specific tools to use them, whatever it is, the technology, which differs from lineage to lineage, shamanic, if it's, if you're Druids
Right.
up in England, or you have the Zulu in Africa, you have the curanderos and the brujos in Mexico, you have the Pacos and the Ayahuasqueros in Peru. No matter what the name and what the specific tools the lineage provides to those who are following, the essence is that as human beings, magic is innate. And that is really clearly power. And I won't get into politics. I don't believe
Mm.
in going into politics.
That'll,
It's just a
that'll make
human
it that'll make it a
structure.
7-hour podcast, right? Don't do that.
Yeah,
Make it
man.
7 hours.
For me, it's
And
just like
another thing,
it's a
again,
man-made thing.
yeah,
It's
and then
a man-made
exactly, it's man-made.
abstract
It's
thing.
we only put in the depth. It's so funny. I can't tell you how many times I would say to students over the past like 4 years, 4.5 years, like this. Careful how much stock you're putting into that one sentence. It's amazing. It's just I can't believe he said it either. But why? What do you care? When has that ever affected you? Anyways, so and it's funny,
Exactly. Yeah.
you call it magic. I'm going to call it intuition. I mean, I think intuition by and large really has gotten the stamp put on it for decades, which is why intuitive development is such a thing now. Which is, I mean, and literally people will sit in a class of intuitive development, discovering different tools of this kind of innate nature, whether you're talking about shamanism, whether you're talking about crystals, whether you're talking about paying attention to your chakras. You start to talk this language and it's still very foo-foo to a certain walk of life, but the people that are open to it, which are far more than the people that aren't at this point, really literally look at it and say, how did I get this far into life and not get this information when it's that organic, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, because with my life and the life we live with my wife, the people we communicate with are the students and the plethora
Mm-hmm.
of people that come to us either for sessions or for classes, etc. I've forgotten that there's people that think this is foo-foo. And I'm going to say two things that I've taken just out of this
Yeah,
last sentence or two that you shared is that the one is like that it's just like talking about the power animals and the magic of animals and what they can bring to
yeah,
our psyche and our day. If you see that eagle that just passed or whatever it is, it's like I was walking into a friend's house and we're talking about the power animals and his brother was there and I could see this through this open door, the blue light of the TV on him. So he turned around through the open door and said, "You guys really believe in that stuff?" And I could see the blue light of the TV and I said, "Well, we do. And you believe in what you're looking at right now. And that's the thing with the mind. You place yourself somewhere and then you start absorbing what's outside and you take that as reality. So if you, all those people that think this is foo-foo and think that this is unreal, the work with the power animals or the work with the sea or the work with the work that you could do with an earthquake in a mountain or flowers, they believe that what is real is TV and advertisement and all these things that are just only, not only human made, but just recently made. And when you come and to see is why is TV so successful, you're going to find backtrack all the way back to the shamans, because storytelling is innate in the human heart, in the human reality. And I've sat in so many circles around the fire, under the stars, having the shamans, or me being now that, light the fire and go into storytelling. Our hearts open, we really thrive in storytelling. And the
Yeah.
difference is this, when do we realize what is true? No, what is reality?
Yeah.
Let's forget about true and not true, because that's a whole other mess. But what is reality? And reality is what comes directly from Earth. And some people say, "Oh, that's a hippie idea." I'm by far not a hippie. I'm okay with my car and with the house I have, and I'm okay not to
Sure.
live in
Right.
China. And I'm okay with hippies too, and I'm okay with people in Wall Street. Where everyone can choose what they want to choose. But the idea is, what is real is the sunset, the sunrise, the child that you brought into your life.
Yeah.
The son that I have in my life, my mother, my father passing, these things are real. And when we start seeing more in that and then start living in that paradigm, we can really start tapping into our intuition, into our magic in all ways.
It's,
In so many levels.
it's pretty incredible how seamless, I love the storyteller angle, because when I teach it, when I teach shamanism in the intuitive development, group, and again, it's really meant to kind of be bite sizes, it's not meant to be an expert. It's kind of, okay, take the next step, find a teacher for this.
Beautiful.
And it's I keep one of the biggest pieces that I talk about is the storytelling part of that. Not only the hierarchy about how it never looked at male or female, positive or negative. You could be a female warrior, you could be a male warrior. They actually didn't care. They just cared whether you brought the hunt home. Were you good at it? So it was actually truly based on the merit of your character. Are you a good hunter? Then you're the hunter. We don't care what your plumbing is. And then you also had the dynamic of really understanding how structured society really kind of blended. And it was about the integrity of the story. It was about the integrity of, like, you were taught this from your elder, and that elder told you, and you brought up the interesting part of your teacher as well. And I want to show a little bit of your website when you answer this. Like, how have your teachers, I think it's brilliant that they said to you, like, be our English mouthpiece, basically. Like we need
Absolutely.
people to translate this into the language of another people. So this moves to the right purpose. And I'm going to show bits of the website here. What are some of the tools that your teachers have given you to be that confident teacher and storyteller?
There multitude. Here, I think you brought us to Facebook, and we could
Yeah,
go
I'm on
to.
Facebook right now, but I'm going to switch over to the actual website as well. Eh, And it looks, I love your content on here, and I also, I'm gonna do a solid here, and I'm gonna have Nina on another time too, because I want to hear her path, and then maybe even have the two of you on another time and talk about how you two work together, because I think that's also a very real thing. I'm gonna break screen here. I'll come back to this in a second. I think that's also a very real thing. You've got so many interesting pieces to this. You have your personal journey. She has her personal journey, and then how do you guys actually work together to do this work together? I mean, all of those things are really fascinating to me, because I think it's not only the interpersonal part of this, but also as we go into the age of Aquarius, again, which is just as shamanistic as anything else, understanding our placement not only on Earth, but also in the galaxy, in the
Absolutely.
universe, right? We're
Absolutely.
we're now moving into an age where our personal accountability has to be at a level where we can match other people. And when we find other people that have matched accountabilities and match purposes, it becomes a powerhouse. So I'm going to already invite you down the road for that. But let me switch back over to show your website as well, because it's really, I mean, I love how this is set up. You have ongoing apprenticeships throughout the year. Don't get hung up on the date and think that it's down the road. But just even how you brought this through, how you bring in the directions, how you bring in, obviously, the serpent, the jaguar, the hummingbird, the condor. Your work here is very flowed to this. Now, your selection of animals, I've seen it differently in other, with other shamans. Is this a Peruvian belief?
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Can you
This
talk a
is the
little bit about that?
Caro. Absolutely. This is the Caro nation people lineage.
Hmm.
The Caros, my teacher Don Francisco and Don Sebastian are the elder Caros. They're the elders of the Caro tribe.
Hmm.
Um, these essentially the Caros are the ancestors of the Inca shamans. When the Caros
Hmm.
saw the conquistadors arrive in the Sacred Valley, they said they didn't need a rattle. They said, "This is not good news. We're out of here." And they took out to higher. The Sacred Valley is anywhere from 9 to 12,000 feet. It's a high plateau, that valley, and they went up to 16 to 18,000 feet and established 12 villages, which are very alive still till today. What happened is that the Spaniards never found them. They never found
Right.
them.
Right.
And not only did they save their tribes by going up there not being found, but the reason they saved the tribes, the reason they went there is that they had a treasure that they were hiding. And the treasure was the reverence to the feminine, the love for the animals, and the
Right.
connection to the magic.
Wow.
Their language, Quechua, has not been changed, has not been tinted, has not been poisoned by the evolution of the language, because English and all these Anglo-Saxon languages have been absolutely not tainted, have been determined by what happened through the Dark Ages.
Mm.
And there's that, because there's a lot of, talking about power and magic, there's a lot of power and a lot of magic in words and in vocabulary and what words we use. How do we describe ourselves? How do we describe our everyday life? We're essentially, when we talk, we're
Yeah.
really in so many ways creating our own reality. And many times, because of the change that's happened in the language, many times we're already putting a spell on ourselves. When I
Yeah.
heard that in English, when I came from Greece speaking Greek and I came to America, I was like, I say, how do you spell that? It's like you spell it by naming something, you're putting a spell on something. So
Mm.
here are these people, the Caros, that have held this language and that teach these amazing, not only ideas, but this
Yeah.
connection with reality that brings us. And so a lot of my training has been in learning some Quechua. It's a very difficult language. It's a very ancient language with a lot of clicks
Yeah.
and clacks in it, sounds that are really not what we're used to. But also with words like aini, to be in correct relationship to,
Mm.
or munai, to have love, but not love the one we know it. Love by meaning by stay as you are. Don't change a thing. When I look at you and say, hey, don't change a thing. That is love of accepting someone, admiring someone,
Muy
having
bien.
affection.
What a
And
what
here's
a
what a
great
lot of
picture.
them, yeah, beautiful, beautiful words.
Hmm.
That really now, then that's the deal here, where for me, where I thought it was all going to be metaphysical, where I thought some of it was tradition and culture, it's a lot more than that. Tradition, culture, language is the heart of shamanism, is the heart of magic. And if you want that positive, beautiful magic that respects and loves the feminine, that honors the animals, and that bows to the magic of everyone. But also, it's how, if we use language, we can hold ourselves back.
Mm.
And it is really, really important to know that where all that is happening and where the magic is taking place is in the chemistry. When I make thoughts, when I have thoughts, the sparks in my brain, this electric sparks, synapses that are happening, are
Mm.
telling my pituitary gland whole story. The pituitary gland is called the master gland, or
Hmm.
in Western medicine. And if we go to Chinese medicine, one of the most ancient shamanic practices, Chinese medicine, they call it the governor gland.
Hmm.
Then the pituitary gland tells all the other glands. A lot of times, my words and the words that I had anxiety, the words that I had deadline, the words that I have deliver, the words that I have
Yeah.
competition, all those words drove my
Performance. Yeah.
body to that disease. It
Yes.
wasn't only the polluted air or the bad lifestyle or food, processed food, but it was also
Yeah.
that the inside poison, the emotional havoc that I was living in. And I just want to add one thing that
Hmm.
keeps on coming back when you talk about intuition, and I'm so like connected with that word and love it so much because it's everything.
Yeah.
And is
Standard
that
issue, I say.
we either live now, this talking about the electricity and the chemistry of the body, because again, I thought shamanism is all metaphysical and is in some other plane, but what I realized through, it's absolutely physical and it belongs to this plane and domain. This is what you heal, this is what you can
Hmm.
evolve, the brain, your thought, this is
So
reality.
it's a
There's
very
nothing.
3D practice for you, but
Oh, absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. Using the rattle doesn't invoke magic from another realm. Using the rattle changes the wavelength the brain is at. That's why we give the rattle to the baby and it falls asleep. It moves into the pineal gland. There's a
Yeah.
there's a whole technology behind it that I also share in my teachings to bring in the science of what's happening, what are the mechanisms behind the magic. But the
Welcome to
overarching,
Spirit Tree. We love that stuff around here. We love spirit and science all together
that's why I
because
love the spirit tree myself. And the overarching, just to say this, is that we either live in our prefrontal cortex and heart with these as guides, the main home of intuition, the prefrontal cortex,
Mhm.
along with love, compassion, empathy, right? These are all housed in this part of the brain. And the heart becomes more aware of the space around and the HRV, the heart rate variability, as Harvard Medical has come and tell us, when things happen, our heart has a reaction. And that reaction is telling our prefrontal cortex how to deal with this. So we're either living here,
Mhm.
or if we get scared, if someone says boo, or you hear like this loud noise or a
Fight or
shrieking
flight.
brakes of a car,
Mhm.
you jump back, you go to the adrenals and the amygdala, and
Yeah.
then you're in fight or flight.
Yep.
And
100%. It's so funny.
that's
This is a constant theme around here where it's like if you're in fight or flight mode, you can't be intuitive. Like you just can't. Like I can't. You can't be running in a marathon or running away from the day. And again, once upon a time, our physical selves were built in such a way that by design we had to run away from dinosaurs. So by design, we needed to be scared and run like hell. But you also can't do a reading while you're running like hell, going, I'm connecting with your grandmother right now. Like it doesn't happen. It just
no,
doesn't happen.
it won't
Yeah.
happen.
So it's almost
And
like the still that you're talking about of the heart and the head. And again, from a chakra standpoint, we're talking about the third eye, we're talking about the heart, and the heart, from a philosophical standpoint, and I have worked with shamans, I have worked with Qigong masters, I've worked with people that really have helped me with my energy pace, as I've come to call it, where our heart is very much, the container of what goes on. It emotes, but it also collects. And that's the source of pain depending upon how you want to deal with it. And you can get into all the psychological parts of it. But some of the interesting stuff that you were talking about was not only the spirit and the science part of it coming together, but also the 3D part of this. Do you feel though that since this is a tool of the 3D, which I'm just fascinated by this concept, does it allow you to open up so that then you can attain the 5D and the 7D, and kind of does it raise our consciousness to a level that we're able to be open up, because we do find that security of self in the 3D through these practices that allow us to be able to go up, or whatever murk of a direction you want to go in. Do you feel that that's actually part of the equation? And if not, I think this is one of those fascinating things. Like the more you think about it, you're like, maybe shamanism is actually that true function that we've been taught through generations, to be able to go and do that work on a higher plane, to understand how spirit works, to understand that, spirit is just like us, just without the flesh and bone, right? But what's your thought process with that?
I think it's a prerequisite, the 3D. It's for me to have any thought, positive
Yeah.
or negative, whatever. I need to use my brain. To use my brain, I got to get blood flowing there. I got to get electricity arriving there. So the quality of electricity and the quality of the minerals and the hormones that are in my blood are going to determine if that's going to be a negative or a positive thought. Right off the bat, Then even more so, if I'm in this positive place, like you said, we had to run from the dinosaurs. So this mechanism of the adrenals and the amygdala has served us well. But now it's almost like that inflammation. I sprung my wrist and then I got inflamed. Now I'm dealing with this inflammation. I can't get rid of the inflammation. It's kind of like it saved us from the dinosaurs, but we can't get rid of this. I don't call it damn amygdala. But the thing is, when I'm there, I simply cannot make some thoughts. I can't make them because the electricity is so 3D. My electricity now is back here and it's telling me either fight or flight. There is no I love you. There is no I understand you. There is no I have empathy. I want to help you, my brother or my sister. There is like, I don't care. I care for my life. I'm running from the dinosaur now. And maybe not only I'm not helping you, I might go like this and run. And that's where humanity is. And that's where they believe that is reality. That's where they believe like, well, I have a better car and a better house, then I'm better off, safer in my amygdala because it's a bigger house. It will be intimidating. It's a faster car. I'll get out of here faster. And to understand that, that's a real surface of the reality. But if I am able to, through these practices, may that be yoga, qigong, meditation, rattling, all these things that you teach, that if I can feel secure enough to move to the front room, I have a better view. To move to the prefrontal cortex, I now have intuition, I have empathy, I have compassion, I have the ability to move from 3D exactly, and only then to move to 5D and 7D, to talk about other realms, to feel other realms. Yeah. While the scared ones back home say, yeah, you're seeing eagles and it's a sure thing, you're cuckoo. While they are hijacked and arrested, they're prisoners of this real short-sighted and small reality that I'm barely going to survive. How is the police going to help me, or the government going to help me, or a system outside going to help me, where the light is really not out there?
I have this argument all the time with people that want to do this work, and then they're like, well, I'll even say to them like, hey, kind of common sense things. Like they may start a practice out of their house, and I say, well, is that really the safest thing? And they're like, well, I have a gun. And I just shake my head. I'm like, so you want to be a Reiki practitioner and you're packing? Like, you should be packing crystals, not a 45. Like, come on, right? But it just goes to show you how culturally ingrained this is. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I've literally had full-blown arguments about like, oh, you're such a pacifist, and you're 6 foot tall, and look at you, nobody's going to mess with you. And I would laugh. I said, that's not the point. The point is that I'm not letting that into my psyche to change who I am, that I'm confident enough that, the right things are going to happen all the time. And, which is a total other, slippery slope down to this. But Ray, I want to thank you for joining, me today. This has been an eye-opening, discussion for a whole host of reasons. And I really want to encourage people, check out the website, get on the email list. Your videos are really empowering. Check it out on Facebook, check it out on the website. And I'll reach out again and let's get Nina on, let's get the two of you on. Let's talk about how you guys do this, and her path and how you guys do this work together. I'm really interested in finding, how you make that kind of unity work here in this age of Aquarius, where we've got this personal individual stuff and we've got the culmination. I mean, I see it happen here, in the Spirit Tree family all the time. When I went through the changes and I was like, okay, the main thing that was the biggest challenge for me with an older mindset was that it was almost too competitive. And now I see all these partnerships happening. Like, hey, let's work together on this. Let's work together on this. But there's an accountability thing that comes into it that's just amazing. So I want to set the stage for that down the road. Ray, thank you once again. The Jaguar Path, the website is quite simply the Jaguar Path, correct? Yeah.
Jaguarpath.com.
Yep.
Jaguar Path.
Jaguarpath.com, and then evolve at jaguarpath.com is also the great way to just drop Ray an email, talk to him about anything upcoming. Now, do you do teaching remote as well, or is it almost always in person?
Everything is online. There is nothing in person right now.
Okay.
Everything is online. We have more than 6 different trainings. They're all happening. We're the School of Yoga, Shamanism, and Martial Arts, Tai Chi and Qigong. So There's a lot happening, beautiful things, and I'll be happy to answer any questions of any of our audience, of your audience, reach out. And Brandon, thank you. It's always an honor. It's so good to see you. It was a little bit too long. It was 3+ years. So we'll
I
meet
know.
sooner this time. And
Well,
come
no,
down to Costa Rica.
no
Come and
offense. I
come
mean,
and visit us here.
I see this all of a sudden. You're sitting in front of like this beautiful tree. You're all lotus position, and I'm like, what the hell? Oh, great, he's on another vacation. No, you moved. Like it was like, what the hell's that about? I'm like, I turn away for 2 seconds. I turn away for 2 seconds, and then the next thing I know, you're down there. All right, friend, listen. And since we can't handshake, we're going to do the heart tap so that we can tell each other we love and care for one another. And I'll see you soon. All right, Ray.
Thanks so much, Brandon.
All right,
Have
thank
a
you.
wonderful day. Thank you all.
All right, keep going.
You too.